All right. So, welcome everybody, and thank you for coming this evening to the memorial tribute to Edward Esko. And it's really wonderful to see so many of you here who are both willing to contribute and, who feel like, well, Ed had really a wonderful impact on you. So we are going to share our memories here together. Alex, would you like to say a few more words
Yeah,
before?
thank you, Bettina, and good evening, everyone. Yeah, we're gathering this evening. Sadly, our dear friend and colleague Edward Esko passed away just about a month ago. And so rather than teaching in the winter conference as he usually does, we're celebrating his life and his legacy this evening. And Bettina and I have asked several colleagues, friends, associates of Ed to speak briefly, reminiscences or stories or tributes. And so we'll do that for the first part of this evening. And then we will open it up as time permits uh, to any of you in the audience. We have quite a few friends who've joined us just for this particular tribute. And we'd like you to keep your remarks brief, roughly 5 minutes or so, because there are quite a few people, and almost everybody here has been touched by Ed in one way or another. And then we will conclude with singing together the One Peaceful World song, which Ed wrote. So, Bettina, do you want to start out?
Sure, I'll start out. Um, well, I met Ed in Germany, and the way this came about was the year before I met Ed, I was doing level 1 in Germany, and
It's going to say ladies and patent.
ladies
I
and
know how to change it, right?
gentlemen,
I think it's because somehow my name is linked to the network.
Susan, could you please mute yourself? Because, yeah, thank you.
The only thing I can think of because it's your computer.
All right, there we go. So, yeah, I was doing level 1 in Germany with Micho and Aveline, and I at the end of our session with Michio gave all of us the opportunity to ask him any questions, or he just said things about us. And, one of the things that he said to me is, well, next summer you'll meet somebody. And I was like, okay, we'll see, So I went back to my university studies and did another whole year. And then in the summer, I was invited to Ireland to teach Tai Chi and to do some cooking classes, which I enjoyed. And I thought, well, maybe I'll meet somebody there. And, nothing happened. And then I was just about ready to leave when my mother gave me a call. And my mother called me from Germany, and she was actually taking that year the level 1 Kushi Institute macrobiotic course in Germany. And she said that the translator for their major teacher, Edward Esko, had just gotten ill, and if I didn't want to please come over because they had nobody to translate, and they wouldn't understand enough. And I said, okay, I mean, I know I wasn't a translator, but my English was probably better than theirs. So, I thought I'll give it a shot. So I went over, and then I got to meet Ed, and I translated for him probably 2, sometimes 3 classes a day. And sometimes it was a little bit more challenging, especially when he used also medical language, and my English with medical terms was very, very limited. But So I remember him talking about jaundice, and I was like, jaundice? What are you talking about? And then he explained, you get yellow. Oh, okay, then I knew what it was. But so I really, really enjoyed translating for him, working with him, and well, we both enjoyed it very much. And, that led to me later coming to the US also the next year, and then, of course, also having a son with him. And yeah, and, a long time relationship. But Ed's teaching was really very inspiring always. Of course, as I also said, in the tribute that I wrote for the Macrobiotics Today, we didn't agree on everything, and that's normal. But we had our times when we really enjoyed each other's company, and yeah, I mean, his teachings were really quite amazing. That was the most wonderful thing, I think. So that is what I would like to share. And Alex, would you like to go next?
I think I'll go toward the end.
Oh, right. But I think actually, if we are, because Oliver Calmetto had asked that he go sometime in the beginning, so I don't know what your order is of, but go ahead. You were going to say,
Is Oliver here?
yes, I believe he's here.
All right. So
Yes, I'm here.
yes. So please.
Okay. Well, I started studying macrobiotics in London in 1980, and then 81. Went to Boston to study more in depth, and Ed was one of my main teachers, and he was very inspiring. He was obviously so interested in all the kind of macrobiotic subjects, and he felt very inspiring, and he felt very committed, and it also felt like he was very generous with his time. He always had time to answer questions, during classes or in between classes, or sitting in a cafe. And I really appreciated, really kind of felt his commitment to teaching, and that kind of inspired me to a lot to start teaching macrobiotics myself. And to me, he always seemed like a bit like an Englishman. He seemed a bit un-American. He was quite kind of reserved and held himself very straight, and he felt quite English to me. And I don't know whether I kind of related to him a bit more because of that. But I don't know if anyone else ever felt that. But that's what I always felt. He felt a bit like an kind of very upright Englishman to me, a bit reserved.
Well, let me tell you, of course, his ancestry is also very English. McGregor.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah. Oh, well, that doesn't surprise me. And then later on, in the 1990s, I visited him in Beckett, and he was again really generous with his time and showed me around, and we sat talking for a long time. And yeah, that really kind of impressed me that even though he was very busy, he was very generous with his time, and we talked about a lot of different subjects. And later, he came to England to do some teaching in my center, or a center that I and someone else was running, and the same thing, just very generous. He always made time to answer everyone's questions, to give people consultations, to give people advice, and I just really felt his very deep commitment to teaching macrobiotics and really making a big difference in the world. And I hadn't, since then I haven't seen him in person, but talked to him a few times and seen him online. And he always seemed very solid, and just always just good to feel he was always there, kind of solid, committed, teaching, and spreading macrobiotics as much as he could. So I consider him as one of my main teachers, early teachers, and really feel a lot of gratitude for him for his commitment and everything he gave.
Thank you, Oliver.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for staying up at this late hour from the UK and joining us and sharing.
That's all right. Yeah, I didn't want to miss it. Yeah.
Okay, Alex, who?
Yeah, let's hear from Maggie Cottrell.
Yes, Maggie. Maggie, if you could unmute yourself now, because I muted everybody, including you. Okay, no, we cannot hear you. Let me just see. Hold on. Where are you? Okay, under what name is she? Administrator. So where are you? Unmute. Okay, now.
All right, now you can hear me.
Yes.
Well, I wanted to say, first of all, that I had an incredible relationship with Ed in that we worked together. He was an incredible teacher, counselor, and I had a great deal of respect for him. But it was also a very pleasant, mutually comfortable relationship. And I don't know, it's just, it was such a loss. It just took me by surprise, because the last time I contacted him and spoke with him, he seemed to be all right. And that was just a few days before he passed away, which was sort of characteristic of his being able to present himself in a very convincing way. So I miss him very much. I admired him. And it's a great loss to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie.
All right, next, let's hear from Jane and Lino. Are you here?
Actually, they just sent me an email that they are having trouble getting on. Let me resend the link to them. So let's hear from the next person.
Okay, Tom, are you there, Tom Monte?
Yes, Tom is here. At least he was.
Yeah, unmute yourself, Tom.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you, yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, it's wonderful to be with everyone tonight. Not for the occasion to grieve Ed, grieve our loss, but to honor him, because he was a great friend and a great human being, and just a great man. That's how I saw Ed. I wrote a long article for Macrobiotics Today. I'm not going to repeat the many things I wrote in that article, but I would encourage people, if they would like to read something about Ed. I included a lot of, or some of his exploits. But I want to just make a couple of comments outside what I wrote that I wasn't able to include. The first thing about Ed that always struck me was that Ed never had an unkind word to say about anyone. He never had a bad word to say about people. If someone began gossiping about someone else, Ed would distance himself. He would never say anything negative about anyone. And I just always respected that about Ed. And I really always appreciated it. He was a very positive human being. He did not engage in negativity, never in my company. And I've spoken to other people. Carol Laurel's here, and maybe she'll have a chance to talk about Ed too. And Carol and I have agreed many times that Ed was always so positive about everyone and every opportunity to teach macrobiotics, to spread macrobiotics, to allow people to, or inform people of the great life that Ed loved and propagated with all his heart. And as I said in the article, with Herculean effort. But Ed was also an incredibly funny guy. I mean, he had incredible creativity. Of course, he was a great scholar, and I note that in the article, and I write about that. But he was also incredibly funny, and he loved to laugh, and he was charming as anything. But I remember just one anecdote about Ed that I'll just share, and it showed how much the combination of his desire to spread macrobiotics and his incredible humor were joined. Early in the 80s, there was a restaurant in Boston called Open Sesame Restaurant, and Ed used to like to go to lunch there. And I was working at East West Journal as an editor, and I would go over there and meet him sometimes. And one time there was the NASA space program was having, the shuttle and the trips to various places in space and so forth. But so that was a sort of like the thing in the news. And Ed had a way of thinking, okay, if something's in the news, I want to get macrobiotics to align with that thing so that we could bring macrobiotics to the forefront in the news. And so since the space program was really active, Ed said, I got this idea about putting rice balls in space. And he went on and on about the possibility of having the astronauts eat rice balls in space. It was hilarious. And he laughed through the whole thing. But you know what? He was also serious. He was also serious about it. I could not figure out how he was ever going to get rice balls in space. But it was always like that with Ed. Whatever was going on, whatever was popular or in some way or another important in the world, he wanted to say if he could align it with macrobiotics. And that's what he was always doing. He was always promoting macrobiotics. That was the core of his purpose, his teaching, his reason for being. And he was always finding ways to promote it in one way or another. And he never stopped right up to the very end of his life. He was busy making a film with Sherry Damaris and Christian Elwell about rice, and he was writing and counseling and teaching. So we miss Ed, and God bless him. We send our love, Ed, and we smile with you, and you still live in our hearts and will forever. So thank you, Ed. Thank you all for being here tonight to honor him.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, for that lovely reminiscence. Kind of a footnote. I think brown rice actually made it into space. At one point, some holistic nutritionist designed a meal plan for the astronauts, and it was essentially macrobiotic. And I remember one of the foods that they were going to give them was amasaki.
Oh.
So whether that actually came to fruition, I'm not sure, but it was in the ether.
Well, okay. Well, Ed was going with it. He was pushing it.
He was pushing it. Great. All right. So has Jane and Lino, have you made it? Bettina, any update?
I don't think that they have come in yet. I mean, I sent them another email, but
All right.
I haven't seen them.
All right. Well, let's go. Is Carol here? Carol Luro?
Laura is here, and also Susan Krieger would like to speak, but Carol.
Okay, let's listen to Carol, and then Susan can follow.
Yeah. Where is Carol?
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you are.
Okay, thank you. If I was to sum up Ed, I would say he was a visionary, a leader, highly intelligent, kind, and so much fun to be with. I met him through my father, who had a tubercular kidney, and he was always sitting in on the consultations. And when Micho was done with my dad, we would go, like Tom, to Open Sesame and eat. And he was so much fun to be with. And one day Micho said to me, "You're going to be teacher, you're going to take the levels, you're going to open up a center, and Ed's going to work with you." I said, "I can't do that." And they said, Ed said, "Yes, you can." So we live an hour away from Boston. We opened a center and Ed worked with us for 38 years. He was very kind. He helped so many people heal. He encouraged people to have consultations with Micho. Wendy Esko would come and do cooking classes. Ed had other counselors come. Ed went on the radio, on many radio stations, local radio stations. Once he went with, do you remember, Alex, you going on the radio station?
Oh, yeah.
And they did many articles about Ed. When people were sick and they weren't on the diet, they were never afraid to tell Ed, "I'm not doing the recommendations," because Ed was so gentle, explained why they're having problems. And if someone was sick and I had to call Ed for some extra advice, Ed would say, "Call me back. Even if our friend is better, call me back. I need to know one way or another." Ed, Ed one day called me to go to Boston to meet with Micho. I went to Boston and we met Micho, and Micho asked me to have Jose Ariel from Portugal come to this community and live with us for a year because we have a big Portuguese community. So we did. Jose came and he helped out the Portuguese people in our area for a year. And Ed had Clyde Matasue come, give shiatsu. He had all the other counselors come. And I have to say, when we traveled with the bands, this woman, Lena, that sewed for the Rockettes, she had numbers on her arm. And I asked her, "What are those numbers?" And she said, "I was in a camp. God got me out. Keep your heart open. God will bring special people to you for special reasons." And I feel God brought Ed to me for a special reason. Ed was always there for us. 3 years ago, I lost my husband December 17th. And Ed not only supported me on the phone, he came down with Naomi and spent a few days with us. Thank you, Ed, for everything you've done. You had a big impact in our area here, and everybody is praying for you. And I'm eternally grateful for you being my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. That was wonderful.
You're welcome.
All right. Let's see. So James?
No.
Oh, I don't know.
Susan Krieger.
Yeah, Susan.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I just want to say that when I got an email from Jane the day after Ed passed, I just cried for a while because Ed to me was all heart. And I met him and Wendy, and I think they had a couple of children at the time in the beginning. And that was when I came over to teach at the Kushi Institute in the 70s. And he always made me feel important and good, and supported me in going forward with any dreams I had about my work. And I remember, I don't know if Wendy Esko is here tonight, but she was as precious to me as Ed. And there was a Lima Osawa was en route to Boston to do some teaching and to visit the Kushis, of course. And another macrobiotic leader at the time, I was the new kid on the block. I just came over from England on invitation from the Kushis to teach at the Institute. And another teacher had said, well, yeah, Lima's coming, but you know, it's a private affair. So you might get to meet her. And I was like, oh, okay, that didn't sound very nice. But I mentioned, or Wendy called me and I said, I hear Lima. She said, yes, exactly. She said, Lima's coming tomorrow. We're picking her up at the airport. Would you like to come with us? And it was like all heart. It's like, oh, these people put me right in the fold. They became my brother and my sister. And they looked after me and introduced me to situations and people at the Kushi Institute because I was new. And I'll never forget that from both of them. They had me over for dinner at their apartment many, many times. They were always, I mean, I know they were both totally gifted in their work. And I connected with that too. But it was from the heart that we became friends. And I love them both. And it's weird to say this, but you know, Ed wasn't supposed to leave now, but he had to. It was time. But I miss him terribly. And I love him and I will love him forever. And he's in my heart. And Wendy, if you guys haven't met Wendy, or maybe you all have, she's another angel. And I will miss him very, very much. Beautiful, exceptional, kind human being and gifted. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
So Jane and Lino have entered the room, but also Alice is here. And because Jane and Lino just entered, why don't we give them a moment? Let's go to Alice next. Alice Fava, if you could.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for asking me to say a few words about Ed. I met Ed about 30 years ago, maybe more, when I first went to my first summer conference at wherever it was back then. And then after that, I started hosting teachers here in Toronto. And I don't know how many times Ed came to my house. So we became, right from the beginning, I felt that this real kinship with Ed. He felt like a family member or somebody, a kindred spirit. So he stayed at my home many, many times. We went out socially, like with other people in the macrobiotic community. He had the most fantastic sense of humor. We would crack up. I mean, I don't even know what we used to laugh about, but we would just laugh. Like all of us would be, out for dinner and it would turn into Ed. Ed would crack us all up. So I have that wonderful memory of his sense of humor, his kindness, and also what Tom Monty said that really struck me. He never had a bad word to say about anybody. If anybody started gossiping, he would not participate. He would always look at the bright side, or he was never not prone to negativity. He was always positive, supportive. Any macrobiotic idea that you had, he would be right behind it. Trying to convince me to start a pickle business, and right, just right in there with me with pickle business. It was horrible, but he anyway. Anyway. Then he was very generous. I mean, how many consultations did I sit in with him and where he was getting paid nothing or next to nothing, and yet he gave so freely of his time. He never acted like he was burdened. And also, that's another thing about Ed. He wrote like 40 books. He was always teaching. He was counseling. He had all these students traveling everywhere. And yet when you met him, it felt like his attention was 100% with you. It felt like he had nothing to do except speak to you. I think that's a sign of a brilliant mind. And that's another thing. He was really brilliant. I think he was a genius. One of the first times I heard him speak about the order of the universe and yin and yang, I was mesmerized. He was so inspiring. he opened up so many possibilities, so infinite possibilities. And I mean, I've heard so many of his lectures, and he was clear, and he looked at things in I don't know, in a different perspective than my perspective. Like it was some much higher level of analyzing illnesses or conditions and so on. And even up to the very end, I mean, I saw him the last time in New York before COVID. And then ironically, during COVID, I think I had more contact with him through the committees that we were on, and through Zoom and on the telephone. And throughout all the past 2 years, when he mustn't have been feeling very well, he never let on. He was still supportive and encouraging and right in there with all the projects. And he had a great life. He lived life to the very fullest. He didn't, he wasn't young. He wasn't scared. Like, he wasn't fearful. Like that wasn't what macrobiotics was for him. It was a big adventure in the biggest sense. And I'm very grateful to him for being my friend. And he was also really, really kind to me, which I'll never forget. When my husband was ill, and then after he passed away, I'll never forget how kind he was to me, and supportive. With everything else that he had going on in his life, with his big family, with all his commitments, he always seemed to have time. So I don't want to go on, but I miss him, and he's in my heart, and he'll always be there. And I feel very grateful to have had him as a friend. And my sincere condolences to his children, to Naomi, and to all of his friends and everybody who loves him. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Alice. So I think now we can go to Jane and Lino, if you want to go next. But are you muted or are you unmuted? You're muted, so there you go.
I think we're okay. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I'd like to first thank Bettina. I know actually, I can't imagine how hard you're working. And I know that you and Alex are very gracious to have invited us to speak. I'm sorry this is the occasion, and it's led to great philosophical questioning in my heart, as it is, I'm sure, in many of yours, for us to have the passing of such a great friend and colleague. Our condolences to Naomi, to his parents, children and grandchildren, and all of you students who mourn his loss. Although there really is not a loss, there's a continuation of spirit. So thank you, Alex and Bettina, first of all. In each of our lives, we have a special person or group of people, and Ed is one of those for me. It was always a privilege to teach at the macrobiotic conferences and to work for 3 years at the KI, and just a deep, deep privilege. And I remember Ed every time, as Alice said, consistently greeting us with a cheerful face and countenance, a good word, a compliment. And he had really an old world graciousness that is lost now with many people. I married one of my old world guys here, and I love that and appreciated that in Ed. He was intelligent without being a snobby intellectual. He presented very complex macrobiotic concepts in a clear way. He became my teacher first in Boston and then in Beckett, and brought me to the wonderful understanding of macrobiotics and its power for not only health, but for ecology and for world peace. He's continued Micho's teachings at a very, very deep level. And I think one of the best ways we can honor Ed is to share his books, share his teachings, and keep that knowledge going and growing for our children and our grandchildren. Ed was a scholar. I've been reading his Light Food book, and he goes into depth with everything from physics, philosophy, Tesla, natural agriculture, science of all kinds, the spirituality of food, and the Big Bang Theory. I mean, he really covers so many bases in that book. I encourage you all to get that book and read it and share it with your family. It's a very profound book. Ed was intellectual, but he was always compassionate too. He sat by the hospital bed of a friend of mine when her husband was passing. He came for 2 days to her home and went to the hospital and sat by her husband's bed with her. And Ed was just a totally unique person. I have to mention Wendy. They were a dynamic couple in Brookline and in Beckett, and instrumental in establishing the macrobiotic philosophy in the US. Ed was very kind to Lino and respectful, and that was a beautiful thing to watch. He would take Lino by the arm and seat him in a very, nice seat. And that's unusual in this day and age. It was beautiful. His book is entitled Light Food, and he talks a lot about light. Light's very important to Lino and me. We every day we make a habit of getting out in the light, in the sky, not looking directly at the sun, but receiving the sun's energy. And I'm from the South, as you might hear in my voice. And one of the things we often say when someone has passed over or about to pass over, go to the light, go to the light. So I say to you, Ed, we'll miss you like crazy. We love you, but may you go to the light. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ed.
Okay, and here's Lino.
Thank you, all of you who are there. My deepest condolences to Ed's parents, his wife Naomi, the children and grandchildren, the friends. And Ed, you are deeply missed. I met Ed in 1971 at a lecture by Michio Kushi at the Arlington Church in Boston. I believe we began to study of macrobiotic together. Great mind, I think, took a ride.
Great minds think alike.
Michio Kushi changed down our life. We discovered in macrobiotic a powerful path toward peace, ecology, and a profession guiding others to natural wellness. Ed was intelligent, a scholar, an excellent teacher, and he expressed himself very clearly with compassion and also good humor. Ed was instrumental in the publication of many books by Michio. We are deeply grateful for that too. Let us continue to share Ed's teachings to further create one peaceful world. Bless you, Ed, wherever you are.
Thank you. Thank you, Lino, and thank you, Jane, for this wonderful tribute. And we shall go to the next person. Sherry, are you there? I think you are here somewhere.
Yeah, I'm here. I think a lot of people have already mentioned very similar things to how I'm feeling about Ed. I got to know Ed closely the last couple years of his life, and we worked together on several projects. And I always felt that he was very embracing. He had a big vision, and with that vision, he carried a lot of encouragement, especially for young people. So he would do, teach these students from all over the world, some in Dubai, some in Vietnam, and he would have me teach them cooking. And he always sort of encouraged everybody as soon as they joined the class to move one more step on the checkerboard and to challenge themselves with their macrobiotic teachings and their studies. And that I thought was such a gift, because he was just moving the movement so much along, even if people resisted, in such a positive way. And he used his humor. He oftentimes, when he'd go around the class and introduce students to each other, he'd really work them up, like, tell funny stories about them or encourage them to speak up or interpret something they went through in terms of yin and yang. So he's very creative in his teachings. And he really inspired me that way. We worked on a couple projects together, and one of the big projects he wanted to see come to fruition was our film at South River Farm. So we went through we formed a small committee. Alice was on it, and Brian and Alex, and we worked every month on Zoom, brainstorming ideas for the project and going out and filming at the farm. So I got to see him a lot. And he was always pushing it. Oh, it's going to be on Netflix, Sherry. It's going to, like pushing it so much ahead. Sometimes it was like, well, slow down. We've got to get it done first. But this really quick story I just want to share. I went through a lot of grieving when he passed, and just felt, the urgency to keep working on the film. So I came in my office the other day, and this is really strange. I found this on my desk. Now, Ed never gave me a business card. I don't know where this came from, but this is his business card. And when I came to my desk, it was laying on top of my computer, which is odd because I don't have anything on my desk in terms of cards or papers or anything like that. And it continually popped up, like whenever I would, go to clean the room, or this card would just reappear. And I really feel that he's on the other side right now, especially, what I was working on with my computer was the PowerPoint for tomorrow night's presentation on the film. And I know Naomi shared one of his last couple sentences before he died was that he wanted to see that film take place. So after, grieving so much, I realized that he's not dead. He's actually with us, and really, pushing again on the other side, as he always does, in a very inspirational, positive way. So.
Thank you, Sherry. And I'm just going to share something that my son said a few days after his passing. He, my son, of course, was also very sad. But he said he dreamt of him. He dreamt that he had a new address. So he wasn't gone. He just had a new address. And for me, it was similar as for you, Sherry. I was sad, but it was just before Christmas, and I wanted to make a knitted hat for my son. So I have a bin with wool in it, And I'm, rummaging through the wool to see what wool I can take to make a hat. And what do I find? A letter. A letter in a bin of wool? Really? Hey, what's this? Oh, Ed's handwriting on there. This was a letter that he had given me, and this was just before Christmas, but right after he passed away. But this was some years earlier when he was all by himself for Christmas. He would have been all by himself for Christmas, and my son and I were alone. So I said, "Why don't you come over for Christmas?" And he had sent me a letter then afterwards thanking me for, inviting him over for Christmas. But that I found it, I mean, that was definitely, that was not coincidence. And in a bin of wool. I mean, really? I mean, I know I've looked in that bin many times. I've never seen that letter there. So it was really odd. I think Lynn Schiddick and also Robin Toner would like to say a few words. Alex, who else?
Does Marley Snyder, who's the filmmaker, want to say a few words?
Sure, I'm here.
Yeah.
I also, just met him a little bit over a year ago when we've been working on the documentary together. And I, took part of the course because I'm not macrobiotic, but I learned a lot from him. And I just always remember him picking on me a little bit more, but in a way where I think he just pushed me and knew like I had a lot in me. So that's probably like the main thing that I really appreciated about him.
Thank you. So let's maybe go to Robin and then to Lynn. Robin, are you here?
Hi, Bettina. Yes, I'm here. Thank you. I met Ed in 2019. Sorry, I'm going to read what I have prepared. I hope that's okay. I met Ed in 2019 after doing an online search for macrobiotic schools and finding the International Macrobiotic Institute. Little did I know that at that time, my life, little did I know at that time, my life and the way I saw the world around me about to be transformed forever. At that time, I did not personally know anyone who was macrobiotic, and I most certainly didn't know anything about yin and yang. But by 2021, I had completed all 3 levels, and Ed, as my teacher, I became an IMI graduate. I just couldn't get enough of listening to Ed's fascinating lectures and his brilliant take on the infinite universe. I began to see life in a new way. I was finding my purpose. So even after completing all 3 levels, I started to repeat the levels again. There was always something new and exciting to be learned in Ed's lectures. Although I only knew Ed for 2 years, I never actually had the opportunity to meet him in person. I believe the profound impact he had on my life was greater than what all of my teachers combined, including in university, could have had on me in a full lifetime. I don't remember many of my teachers in life, but I will always remember Ed. Ed had a very contagious laugh, and he always found something to laugh about during class. Even if he was the only one laughing, it seemed that would make him laugh even harder. With his genuine belly laughter, he taught me the importance of welcoming humor into my own life. And since we were in a pandemic for the majority of the online studies, I would often have children at home jumping around, screaming and rustling in the background during classes. This never seemed to bother Ed. Instead, he would find tremendous humor in the scene, or maybe it was the distraught look in my face as a mother that cracked him up. Either way, Ed was curious about my kids, and his playful laughter put me at ease. I have learned to take motherhood a little more lightly because of him. He taught me to enjoy my children by laughing a little more at stressful situations. This has proved to be a very powerful tool for me, not just with my children, but in all areas of my life. Ed also always made classes very fun by encouraging his students to get to know each other and engage in conversation. And because of that, I am now connected with many macrobiotic friends from around the world. Friends whom I regularly communicate with and hope to continue my studies with for years to come. Ed always encouraged us to please continue your macrobiotic studies, he would say. And right up until the end of Ed's life, when we were patiently awaiting the next class, he would simply remind us to continue our macrobiotic studies until he could return. And as we know, Ed dedicated so much of his time to studies, reading, researching, writing, and spreading his knowledge to others. Because of Ed, I now have my very own continually growing home library full of his book recommendations, like The Cheese Trap, Autobiography of a Yogi, The China Study, and Sugar Blues, just to name a few of those he would often refer to in his lectures. I will be forever grateful for these resources, and especially for the many books he wrote. I am grateful for the IMI, for my lecture notes, phone conversations, and email exchanges. Also, all the New Year's celebrations, solstice, and Thanksgiving celebrations we would do via Zoom. This past spring, Ed asked me to help him with his book, Light Food, Eating for Consciousness. I knew this was an opportunity of a lifetime. It was the biggest honor of my life. I worked with him, checking for typos and spelling mistakes, helping to clarify a few sentences. He even published in his book a short essay I wrote for my level 2 project. When things were finalized, Ed told me in an email that now it was my turn to write a book and to have my proofs into him by the next day. Of course, I laughed it off as though he was joking. But if I could be completely honest, I think he actually meant what he said. Ed believed in me more than I believed in myself, and he saw the potential in all of his students. For the past 2 years, I referred to Ed as my teacher, but really, Ed was more than a teacher. He was a friend. He always made himself available to talk about remedies when my kids were sick or when I was in search of personal guidance. He would simply say, "Let's talk, give me a call." I would always leave the conversation feeling hopeful. He was good at shedding light on a hopeful future, even when life was most challenging. Finally, I would like to say that I'm not really sure where my path is going in macrobiotics. Maybe someday I too will teach. Maybe I will write that book. But I'm going to continue my studies and continue believing in the possibility that we will all someday live together in a peaceful world. Even though Ed is not here in the physical world, I know he is still working to help us all turn our dreams into reality. Thank you very much for listening and for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Robin. What a wonderful tribute. Lynn, are you here?
Hi, Bettina. Hi, everyone. Wow, I've got tears and I've got joy. And I walked out and I said, I need to be near the redwoods because I feel, you know, Ed Esko is like a big redwood tree. And it's a big loss for all of us on the physical plane. But I met Ed in the little office of One Peaceful World with Alex. I was in there and I was doing a little bit of advertising with Alex, and Ed comes in all bubbly and bright. And he said, you know, I said, it's been really quite a journey because I was fairly new into, you know, the whole workings. I guess it was a little late, actually. I came into macrobiotics in 87. He said, you know, you never have to worry because Michio and you are really close. But he was so funny the way he said it. He's like, you never have to worry about money. You never have to worry about spiritual things. You've got it. He was like this moment of like bubble to me. And I saw him just in 2014 when the last summer camp at the KI, it might not have been the last one, but when Michio was there and Ed came up and we chatted, but he had me come into the class, and I'd been working as a nurse, and I'd been driving 700 miles a week. And he had me come up to the front of the room. He said, Lynn, what have you been eating? Let's teach the students. And he had me like really, put myself out there. And I think that's what he did. He brought us forth in this presence of macrobiotic. And when he died, I grieved. I can't tell you, I kept grieving and grieving. And I really had a big presence of him when he died. And there was a moment when I was putting up a shower curtain, and my shower curtain fell, and this huge big light came into my room, and I knew it was Ed. I said, "You're here." And it was the day after he died there. And it was quite a profound moment of time. I guess it's just, he stayed with me for about 5 minutes. We talked, we chatted about, you did tremendous work, and I thanked him. And I feel when a person dies, as many of us know with macrobiotic, the work that he has profoundly done. He came onto the Torch platform last year with me and Bentina and Alex, and he was like, we have to build the school, because Torch is building a macrobiotic school, and I've been working on curriculum and trying to figure out how to, do some of it. But he was so sincere in his words, and I knew he was going to do it. And I think that's what we know about Ed Esko. He was going to do it, whether when he put his word into action, it was a really clear presence. And that's what I feel like he gave to macrobiotics to me. And his presence of, for me, since then, I've done a 12-day retreat since he died, and just chewed. I didn't eat, I ate one meal a day, and I didn't fast completely on brown rice. I had some vegetables and such, but there's a presence of macrobiotics since he passed that I feel like he's just around me. And he said, come on, let's go. You have to do it. And we were both 5 soil. And so for me, it was this presence. And we used to go down to the coffee shop all the time and chat down at the coffee shop together. He said, come on, let's go down to the coffee shop. And we just have these fun adventures. And it wasn't about anything more than a fun adventure. And I think that's the adventurous part that I want to leave with his spirit, his presence of adventure, and his presence of the deep witness of macrobiotics, and his vastness on exploring a much great, a really great view of macrobiotics, not just food. And I'm very grateful. And Alex and his family, Wendy and Ed, when they lived in Beckett together, and when Bettina first came to Beckett, I was in the family, we were living in Beckett. And I just want to give a shout out to all of you, because I know how big it is for the kids. And I worked with the boys as well. And I just want to give a grace to these boys. They're just so beautiful. And I don't know Senan well, but I know Matthew quite well, because I was in the organic food industry, but they're just really wholesome people. And I'll leave with the one macrobiotic song that we have is from Ed Esko, like a really good macrobiotic song. And I wish we could play that. I don't know who has a copy, but I would love to get a copy of that song, of him playing it. There must be a video somewhere, Alex, of him playing his macrobiotic song.
We're going to play it tonight.
Oh, yay. Fantastic. So that's me. I've got tears, I love you guys. And Alex, I know the two of you, just we're so profoundly brothers. And I just want to give you that shout that we're all here for you as well. You've both you were 2 peas in a pod for me when I came into macrobiotics, and I'm just so eternally grateful. And Jane and Lena, it's so good to see you, because we came into spiritual seminars together, and I love you guys, and I miss you. So let's get together soon. God bless you all.
Thank you, Lynn, for your poignant words, your heartfelt memories and stories. Let's now go to Brian Smith.
Thanks, Alex. I'm Brian Smith. I live in Cleveland, Ohio. I've been aware of macrobiotics for many years, actually since I was a teenager, but I didn't take my first class until I was an adult. And towards the end of 2019, something prompted me to learn more. So I reached out to Ed and ended up taking level 1 with him just as the pandemic was heating up. The other student who originally signed up was not able to attend, so for all of level 1 it was just Ed and me. We would often get off topic and he would tell me stories about Michio and Gloria Swanson and John Lennon and Yoko Ono and so many other people he had known along the way. Several people have talked about his humor, and we laughed a lot during those classes. So he was not only a teacher and a mentor, but I like to think that we also became friends. During the class, Ed encouraged me to contact Christian Elwell of South River Miso and obtain some rice seeds, because with the way the pandemic was going, society might collapse and I would have to feed the Midwest with my very own Cleveland rice. The world needs you, I remember him saying, and you can do this, you can save the world. And he was so assured and so convincing that I believed him. So I called Christian out of the blue, got some rice seeds and grew some rice, and then became part of the project that Sherry is leading to make a documentary about rice. A few days after Ed died, I was washing the rice and remembered Ed's last book, Light Food, and everything he said about the awns of the rice channeling the energy of the universe into the rice kernels. So I walked out onto my deck and something prompted me to hold it up to the night sky, asking the knowledge of the universe to bless the rice and to help me to pass on all that I had learned. And in my mind I heard a voice say yes, and I believe it was Ed. So the last couple of years and what I have learned have been amazing, and I owe a lot of it to Ed. Thanks.
Can I just say something? Sorry, it's Alice again. So I forgot to mention this. So I think, can you see this? My rice bouquet?
Yes.
So this bouquet of rice, really, it was Ed. I had a big garden this year. I got a piece of farm and I tried to grow rice, being inspired by the spirit of rice and especially Ed Esko and the rest of them. So it was a lot of hard work. The land was supposed to be wet, but it ended up being a drought. But I did, and I have it on my altar with my altar to people that have passed. So this is in honor of Ed. Brian reminded me about the rice.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other friends or family members who'd like to speak?
Yeah, I would like to say a few words.
Sure, Virginia Harper.
Yes. And sorry, I'm not on here, but I have a few clients in my house. So I didn't want to miss this tribute to Ed. He was also one of my teachers when I was a mentor at the Kushi Institute. I too was very inspired by Ed, mainly the curiosity. I came to macrobiotics because I was so ill and I needed to save my life. And to meet people like Ed who have come from a place of understanding philosophy and life in a bigger way just really intrigued me. And he was always there to answer questions, and there were also always about food and the way he presented everything. Many of you said that in a humorous way, just always piqued my curiosity on how everybody could live a life macro to them, and allowed my vision of macro to grow bigger than this boxed in theory. He was very supportive of the programs I put together, and in fact invited me, and him and Alex invited me to bring a program to the Kushi Institute, which was such an honor to do. And then he invited me to co-author one of the books he wrote on Crohn's and colitis especially. And I thought, wow, he's asking me to participate in this. So it is just he always did see the best in you, and he had a way of making your thoughts and dreams a little bigger than you thought you could have them. And I was always walking away going, wow, he really thinks I can do that. And that's a very special gift in anybody. I think the main thing is that he was open and he was friendly and he was willing to teach anybody that would listen to him. And I think that's a special gift to bring concepts that we have in this philosophy down to everyday life. And I would always appreciate the simplicity and that dedication to what he believed in. I would always be grateful to Ed and send the family my love and prayers and comfort during this time of missing him in the humanness that we have, and but also knowing that his teachings will comfort us as we go forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much. Okay, anybody else?
This is Grace Schuler in the Philadelphia area. I met Ed in the 80s when Alex, you and Ed would come every other weekend for 2 years to do a Kushi Institute extension program in the Philadelphia area. And I remember Ed with his easel and writing the spirals, and he taught back then, always asking a question, is it yin or yang? And we had these questions like, is this yin or this yang? And he would show us different perspectives of how to look at things. So you, Alex, and Ed were my introduction to macrobiotics, and I'll tell you, it was the foundation upon which I've built the rest of my life. So I will be forever grateful for all my macrobiotic teachers. And Ed, may you rest in peace. Thank you for everything you've given to all of us.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Let's put the photo up of Ed for a moment.
Got the montage? Yeah.
So here are some pictures from Ed and Naomi, Ed, Michio, and Wendy, Ed teaching at the Eastover, Ed at the South River Miso Farm, Ed, Alex, Michio, Midori, and remind me.
Dr. Srinivasan of the Atomic Energy Institute in Mumbai.
That was for the Transmutation project?
Yes.
And yeah, here Ed is teaching at the International Conference on Future Energy. Ed loved baseball, so he took our son to baseball. Of course, spirals, Ed's most favorite thing. That's a great picture. And here again, he's teaching at Eastover. This was again one of the Transmutation project photos. I mean, one of his things that he was very excited about. Here, more spirals, teaching at the Kushi Institute. Yeah, so different pictures. Anybody else who wishes to share before we go to Alex? Alex, I think, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Bettina. Yeah, Ed and I were friends and collaborators for longer than I'd like to recall, about 40 years or more. And I think what I remember most about Ed was his adventurous spirit. That for him, however difficult and challenging the situation was, there was just no question that if we had faith in the universe, that we would overcome. And in the year 2000, we went out to Northern California, and we actually started our Amber Waves grassroots project in order to save brown rice from genetic engineering. And at that time, it was a fait accompli, a done deal with Monsanto. They had already planned to introduce GMO rice in the Sacramento Valley, which is where 95% of all the brown rice in America is grown. And we went to visit the Lundbergs, we went to visit other farmers, and I think I was always kind of skeptical that we would, have any kind of impact, but we were able to mobilize farmers, and eventually a large movement and coalition developed. And to our astonishment, we defeated Monsanto, and GMO rice was never introduced in California. And Ed was always very confident that we would succeed. In fact, on a subsequent trip to Washington, D.C., where we actually met with Dennis Kucinich, who was the macrobiotic congressman at that time. We went to the FDA and the EPA and all kind of government agencies. We went to the Chinese embassy, and I think, and this was one example where we had this. We met with the scientific advisor in the Chinese embassy, and he was a young man, a young diplomat, and he really had no experience of food or diet or health or agriculture. And in talking with him, we're trying to figure out what is a way to reach him, because we wanted the Chinese government to stop their GMO trials. And so just in conversation, we discovered that he came from a city called Tsingtao. And Ed, because of his vast culinary experience, he remembered that Tsingtao was the name of a famous Chinese beer. And so we said, this is where the great Chinese beer comes from. And the young man said, yeah, and then his face just lit up. He was just totally radiant, because that was the number one industry in that city. And so then Ed and I helped. We went into all of the ramifications of what genetic engineering how that would contaminate the rice crop and the other grains that went into, and the barley that went into the beer. And by the end of the meeting, he was totally outraged at the prospect of losing the beer. And so he promised to send all of our petitions and all of our scientific research and everything to the Chinese government in Beijing. And whether that had any impact, it's hard to say, but their trials ceased for a while after that. So that was just one little story about how Ed had influenced on a very global scale. We actually, that same trip to Washington, we visited with what is called the Wheat Associates, which is the #1 trade association for wheat in the United States. They handle all, billions of tons of wheat that are exported all around the world. And so we met with them, and they said, this is very serious what you've presented, because again, we presented the case against GMOs. And then they said, Monsanto has called a summit in Kansas in the end of the month. And they said Monsanto is lobbying to get all of the major wheat groups, including ours, behind genetically engineered wheat. And so they said, can you help us orchestrate a campaign to answer Monsanto? So when we went back here to the Berkshires, we stayed up late and put together all kinds of materials and gave them kind of the game plan for that meeting. And so when the Wheat Associate people went to Kansas to meet with Monsanto, they presented it. And instead of uniting the farmers, Monsanto found that the farmers were united against them. And so that went down to defeat too. So since then, there's been no GMO rice or wheat in the United States. So Ed was on the forefront of that. The other great area in recent years that he took the lead in was transmutation. And Bettina just showed 3 pictures relating to that. And transmutation was a theory that George Osawa introduced with his spiral of elements in the 1920s. And then in the 1960s, he conducted the first experiments in Tokyo in which he was able to transmute a small amount of carbon into iron and a small amount of sodium into potassium. And then Micho got involved with this, with Osawa, and began to teach that. And then in the early 2000s, Ed said this is absolutely essential that for humanity to pass safely through the end of the spiral of history in roughly 2036, that we have to achieve transmutation. So we created a little group called Quantum Rabbit, which took its name from Alice in Wonderland, the rabbit going down the rabbit hole. And that whole short story, or that whole story by Lewis Carroll, has actually been interpreted as a parable or a satire in modern physics and chemistry. But in any event, we began a series of experiments with Micho's blessing, and it eventually evolved into dozens and dozens of tests. We created laboratories in Vermont, in Maine, in New Hampshire, and here in Massachusetts. And we're involved with various colleagues, mostly from the kind of the mainstream scientific community. Also, we worked with we wrote articles for the leading alternative science magazine in this country called Infinite Energy. And Ed really orchestrated all of our experiments and formulas. In many ways, I was, the journalist or the writer who put everything together and saw the big view, but he actually came up with all of the actual formulas. And I'd just like to read you just a couple of paragraphs from a tribute that Infinite Energy just published after Ed passed away. They wrote a beautiful little couple paragraphs. And keep in mind, again, these are not macrobiotic people. These are very mainstream scientists. They say, our friend Edward Esko passed away on December 11th, 2020 at the age of 71. He is most well known to our readers as the co-founder of Quantum Rabbit, a New England company working on transmutation, nuclear remediation, and low-energy nuclear reactions. He and Alex Jack and Woody Johnson founded QR in 2005. Esko published numerous reports in Infinite Energy, most on transmutation work done at QR labs at various locations around New England. Infinite Energy distributes many of his books on these topics, including Cool Fusion, Corking the Nuclear Genie in Search of Novae, Low Energy Transmutation of Nuclear Waste. Cool Fusion is a collection of many of the IE articles, Infinite Energy articles, by Ed. In one of our issues, Dr. David Nagel reviewed the book and QR's work, and he noted, quote, for years, I have been grumping that much of the literature on transmutation does not include proper chemical analyses before and after experiments. The QR team is an exception. Nagel called the book and the experiments, quote, an important contribution to the development of a new paradigm of the formation of elements, unquote. From 2008 to 2011, the Infinite Energy Technical Editor, New Energy Foundation Chairman, Bill Zieber, witnessed numerous lab experiments at QR on the transmutation of heavy metals, including titanium, palladium, and gold. Zieber said, I was impressed with the experimental setup, the workers involved in the analyses that showed positive results. Esko was very involved in macrobiotics, study with Michio Novel and Kushi. Last year, he re-released Kushi's The Philosopher's Stone with updated information about transmutation. He founded the International Macrobiotic Institute and co-founded Planetary Health. He authored and co-authored over 30 books on macrobiotics. He's a truly remarkable man. He will be missed by all who knew him. His work will carry on at Planetary Health and QR. So that was a nice tribute. So, and he did get recognition from wider society, for which he's really strove mightily. And I think what shocks me more than anything else was that I was counting pretty much on Ed to, be our pilot or co-pilot to 2036, which was the, major stepping stone in the culmination of what Michio called the spiral of history in the new 81-year cycle. And the fact that he's going to be helping us from the other side now rather than right here leading the charge is really quite astonishing. But I think, as Lynn and others have said, his spirit will help guide us through this very challenging time.
Thank you, Alex. You would like to sing the song?
Yeah, so to conclude this evening, we would like, Danka is here with me, and we would like to conclude with the One Peaceful Song that Ed wrote both the musics and the lyrics. Ed was a fantastic musician and composer. In fact, that was kind of one of his original loves and passions was music. And throughout his life, he wrote many different songs and played the guitar. And the song that we're going to play and sing this evening is called One Peaceful World. And this actually became the anthem of the macrobiotic community in, I think, the late 70s or 80s and 90s. We sang this often at summer conferences and in graduations at the Kusi Institute and many other events. And it's a beautiful song. And so we're going to begin by just playing a version on the piano that Danka's singing teacher played for us this morning. And then we're going to sing it, and then we'll show you the lyrics. And we'd ask you to sing along, but mute yourself, because I'm told that technically, because of the time lag, it doesn't work so well if everybody sings together. It may be hard to understand. So Danka, do you have the music here?
I don't know how loud it is.
That's right. All right, so now we're, okay, now Danka and I are going to sing the first verse, and then please join in mutely if you'd like, and then we're going to scroll up the words for the succeeding verses.
We'll sing actually the whole song, right?
Yeah, we'll sing the whole song.
Yeah.
In each and every every country, in each and every land. The people of our planet will start to understand. We can live together in peace and harmony, and love will grow between us like one big family. Oh, 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 one peaceful world. Oh, 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 one peaceful world. The sun that shines above us, the earth that lies below, to the universal spirit our thankfulness shall go, and the light will shine upon us every single day. When dreaming of tomorrow, this is what we say. Oh, 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 one peaceful world. Oh, 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 one peaceful world. In the east the sun is rising, in the west it's going down, and the two will join together in the new world coming round, where unity will guide us in everything we do, and dawn will soon be breaking on a world that's fresh and new. Oh, 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 one peaceful world. Oh, 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 one peaceful world. Some are white, some are yellow, skins of black, skins of brown. When we listen to our hearts beat, they all make the same pure sound. All the boundaries of the nations can be seen from outer space. It is all just land and ocean, beautiful home for the human race. Oh, 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 one peaceful world. Oh, 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 one peaceful world. Atlantic to Pacific, from Suez to the North Sea, from Tierra del Fuego to wherever you may be, from Jesus to Zoroaster, from Moses to Mahavir, from Buddha to Muhammad, there's truth for us to hear. Oh, 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 one peaceful world. Oh, 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 one peaceful world. From Boston to Buenos Aires, Moscow to Tokyo, the same sun shines upon us, and around it we all go. From Sudan to Australia, take Canberra to Great Wall, from Stonehenge to Mount Fuji, from the Rockies to Taj Mahal. Oh, 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 one peaceful world. Oh, 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 one peaceful world. Okay, great. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us this evening in memory of Ed. May his soul ascend with our prayers and thoughts. The family will be holding a memorial service of their own in person for those of you who may be in the New England area or who will be traveling. It will be on the equinox, which I believe this year will be March 20th. The date or the details have yet to be announced, the time and the place, but I think that's the date I was told by the family. So we will be announcing that when we hear further on our planetaryhealth.com website or the macrobioticsummerconference.com website.
Or the email.
Or through email blast, yes, to all of you who've signed up. We'll get that out by email. So any final words or thoughts, Bettina?
I think we've heard many wonderful things, and it is good to remember Ed. It is good to have all these wonderful memories and yeah, he feels like he's here. Thank you, everybody. I think then we will conclude for this evening. So be well. And for those of you that we will not see tomorrow, hope to see you sometime soon. And the others we will see tomorrow at 11, starting with my cooking class. And then I think it is what? Sherry, let me see. What's after this? My cooking class, then, then a free discussion session, then it's Jarka and Karel's cooking class, then Sherry Damaris with the Spirit of Rice, and then Manjari Yoga, free discussion session with Alex and myself, and then a cooking class from the Kimberly Ashton from the Chinese macrobiotic cuisine. So that is our program for tomorrow. Good night, everybody. Be well.
Thank you for your wonderful works.
Thank you so much, Bettina and
Thank you.
Alex and everyone.
Thank you, everyone who spoke. It was beautiful.
Beautiful, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Bless you.
Love you, Jane.
Bye, Jane. Love you.
Love you, Lino.
Hi,
Thank you.
Carol.
Love you,
Bye now.
Lino. Love you, Jane. Nice, Susan. Love you. It was great to
Thank
see
you,
KG.
Lynn.
Oh, it was so great to see KG too. So nice.
Good night. Good
Good night.
night.
Oh, good
Bye,
night.
Maggie. Bye,
Bye, Maggie.
Maggie.
I'm gonna come see you.
Well,
I'm gonna come see you, Jane and Lino, soon. And
Okay.